Did I have mental illness symptoms even as a child? Well, to tell you the truth, I was never a normal child in really any sense of the word. I struggled with basic things like eye contact, sarcasm. I never liked being hugged or touched. I really still don't. And I remember the pressured speech that I have now, I had even as a child, since I was probably about like 10. I remember some kid telling me I talked really fast, and I didn't really think anything of it at the time. I thought I spoke normally, but maybe I just had a lot to say or something. I didn't realize that that was actually a bipolar symptom peeking its ugly head at the time. Really, everybody in my family kind of talks fast and talks a lot, so I just kind of thought I was like them. I didn't really think it was anything out of the ordinary. And I had other symptoms too. I had the intrusive thoughts and the anxiety before I even knew what they even were, what they were called. When I would worry too much, I used to just call it worrying too much instead of anxiety. And then with the bad thoughts, I just called them bad thoughts when they were actually intrusive thoughts. My parents would ask me what's wrong, and oh, I'm just worrying too much again, or hey, what's going on now, and oh, I'm just having more of those bad thoughts. It's just what I used to call them. So that's just how long I dealt with all that stuff. And to tell you the truth, at that age, I thought I was the only one that dealt with that kind of stuff. I didn't think that other people dealt with that too. Even though my parents insisted that it was normal and other people dealt with it, I just was convinced I was the only one that dealt with it. And then in my teenage years, things started to get worse. I started to isolate myself a lot. I just clearly had signs of depression. I just wanted to do nothing but sleep in my big dark room or just watch TV. I didn't want anything to do with any sharp objects at all. Knives, razors, anything that could be, in my mind, harmful. I didn't like matches or anything with fire either. I just had horrible thoughts of hurting people, and I didn't know how to explain that stuff to people, and so I just wanted to avoid anything that could exacerbate those thoughts. So, out of sight, out of mind was my mentality. And then people would ask me what's wrong, and I just didn't know how to tell them what was in my head and what was bothering me. Eventually, my pressured speech started to get worse too, to the point that people could barely understand me. I had people telling me, oh, you should be an auctioneer, like one of those people that talks fast, like in auctions and stuff. Yeah, you should do that when you get older. That should be your job. Okay. Yeah, that was funny, like the first couple times I heard it. And then it started to get really annoying because then it wasn't just one or two people telling me that. It was like every other person telling me. And then for every person that was fascinated in my pressured speech, like telling me I should be an auctioneer or something, there was somebody who would be not as amused. You'd have somebody who would claim that my pressured speech was making them anxious. And as somebody who has anxiety myself, that made me feel terrible. I didn't want to make people feel anxious, especially when all I was trying to do was talk to them. So clearly, there was something else more going on than what I realized. So that's when therapy came in, when I was about 16. I was originally diagnosed with depression, with just, the withdrawing and the isolation. So I got put on medications. I still have this one distinct memory that I went in to see my therapist. And I was super chatty. I'm talking like 50 miles an hour, my mind racing, freaking motor mouth. Just, it was insane. So I just, came in, sat down. Literally the second my butt hit the chair, I'm just blah 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 the whole time. And I remember her looking at me funny, like, "Are you okay?" And I'm just like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine. I feel great. Why is that a problem?" And she's just aggressively scribbling in her notebook, and I notice that, but then I get distracted by something else, and I'm just kind of whatever, just looking around, just easily distracted in my manic state. Because that's exactly what was going on. I was experiencing mania for probably one of my first few episodes of it. And I didn't know what was going on at the time, but she clearly did. So that was one of the first signs that I was clearly bipolar and I was not aware of it. Eventually, I saw a psychiatrist, and I still remember her testing me, and it was the same thing where, I came into that visit the second my butt hit the chair and I turned to face her and speak to her. I didn't shut up the entire time. I just literally just blah 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 the whole time, which is a little funny now when I look back on it, but at the time, kind of embarrassing because clearly that doctor was just, kind of giving me the stink eye. Not literally the stink eye, but she's just, clearly she's surprised. She she probably didn't expect me to be that talkative when I came in that day, and that was how I got diagnosed at the age of 17. So of course my parents were a little alarmed by that, being 17 years old and having to start on medication. I mean, I was already on medication when I was 16, but having to be on different meds now because the treatment for bipolar disorder is different than just depression by itself. You have to worry about certain medications making bipolar worse, like antidepressants, which I was on an antidepressant at the time, and that probably was exacerbating some of the symptoms. So I saw several different psychiatrists. That was the first one. Eventually, I think she went to a different practice, and plus I was on so many medications by the time I was in like my 20s that I had to see another doctor. I mean, I didn't technically see another doctor right away. I got a second opinion, and then when I saw that doctor, they thought I had ADHD, put me on a stimulant, and then that made everything worse. I was probably 18 by this point. So that didn't work, so we decided to stick with the original psychiatrist, but then eventually she left practice or something happened. That, or I think I just got old enough because I didn't have to see a child psychiatrist anymore, because I wasn't a child anymore. So then I went to go see another psychiatrist who, well, to tell you the truth, I wasn't on the same page as them. They thought I had a personality disorder, which, I mean, I could. I don't know, maybe. But what I was concerned about was my bipolar symptoms being brushed under the rug because I was afraid of ending up in the hospital if the symptoms got worse, if they weren't managed, and they didn't seem to think I had bipolar disorder. So that's what I was concerned about. And since I ended up in the hospital last year, that was clearly a valid concern. This was before that happened, of course. So yeah, I wasn't on the same page with that doctor, so I went to go see another one that I really liked, but then he switched practices. So then I had to see another one. And that one was okay for a little bit, but then it was expensive, and to tell you the truth, I wasn't impressed from a customer service standpoint. So that one didn't work out. I didn't feel valued. I mean, I was on the same page diagnosis wise and everything, but sometimes you have good doctors and sometimes you have bad doctors, and you have to be an advocate for yourself. If you think that something's not right, speak up, do something, even if it's just not going back. You have a right to do that, And then that brings me to the psychiatrist I have now, who's wonderful. I've been seeing her for about a year now. So I had to, I had a couple bad apples before I found a good one, Unfortunately, that's just kind of part of the process. So I had a lot of things that went on throughout my life, throughout my childhood, throughout my teenage years that were all mental illness related. But all in all, you know, I took my diagnosis, I took everything I had, and, it did kind of feel like a death sentence at the time, but I kind of got to a point where I'm like, it doesn't have to be that way. I can live with this stuff. I can rise above this. I can still live a great life. And that's what I've been doing now. I eventually, I eventually went to college and had to manage my mental health. And in some ways, it actually was beneficial because it helped me get more work done on the days I was manic. But then there were times when I was depressed where I struggled to get work done. But I made it through college. I worked part-time through college and lived at home. And then eventually, it took me a little longer to do things like get my driver's license and to move out and everything, but eventually I did all of that. And now here I am, just still managing my mental illnesses the best that I can. I was in the hospital last year, but I made it past that, just sticking to my appointments, taking my medication. So if you're somebody who has to deal with mental illness, especially if it's from a young age, it doesn't have to ruin your life. It doesn't have to be a death sentence. It doesn't have to be catastrophic. You can learn to live with it and you can learn to rise above it, was the point of this video. So I really hope that this is insightful for somebody who's struggling with mental illness and is kind of looking for a success story, something that kind of shows you, hey, you can do this, you can rise above it, because you can. With a good support system, like therapy, medications, and routine, you can. You can learn to live with this, just like me. So, until next time, have a great day, guys.